The first thing they took was my workshop key, and that's how I knew my own son had been planning this for longer than a single afternoon. My name is Caldwell Pruitt. I'm 68 years old, and for 39 of those years I built cabinets and staircases and porch railings out of a tin roof shop behind my house in Merrill Bend, North Carolina. My hands look like two old roots now. My back has a permanent lean to the left from leaning over a lathe, but I never asked for soft. Soft was for men who didn't have a granddaughter to raise. Her name is Bertie. She's 11. Her mother, my daughter, died of an aneurysm in a grocery store parking lot when Bertie was 4 months old. And the day we buried her, I made a promise over the casket that I have kept every single hour since. Bertie's father had already vanished into another state by then, so it was me. Just me. An old widower with sawdust in his lungs and a baby who screamed all night because she missed a mother she would never remember. I learned to make a bottle. I learned to French braid by watching videos on a phone I could barely operate. I learned which cartoon dog she loved and bought the lunchbox with that dog on it. I sold the truck I'd restored over 2 winters to pay for the year her asthma got bad and we lived half our nights in the emergency room. I did all of it without complaint, because she was the last piece of my daughter left in the world, and I would have crawled across broken glass for her. But this story isn't really about Bertie. Not at the start. At the start, it's about my son. Reuben. Reuben is 41. He left Merrill Bend at 19, swearing he'd never come back to a town that smelled like chicken plants and disappointment. And for the most part, he kept that promise too. He surfaced every few years. A wedding I wasn't invited to. A divorce I heard about from a cousin. A business in Charlotte that was always about to be huge. He'd call when he needed something. He never called when he didn't. So when his number lit up my phone last March, I knew before I answered that he wanted something. I just didn't know yet how much. They came up the gravel on a Sunday in a leased German car that didn't belong on my road. He hugged me at the door, and his cologne was so strong it made my eyes water. And he said, "Dad, you look good. You look strong." Which was a lie, and Reuben only ever lied to me when he was about to ask for the world. We sat at the kitchen table. Bertie was at his sleepover. He turned his coffee mug around and around in his hands the way he did as a boy when he'd broken something. "I've been thinking about you out here all alone," he said. "It isn't right. You're getting up there. The shop's too much for you. Bertie needs structure, real schools, a woman's influence." He let that hang. "I want you to come live near me. I found a place, assisted living, but the nice kind, golf course out the window. And Bertie comes to live with me and Tara? Good district. Every advantage." I told him no, before he finished the sentence. I told him Bertie was happy. I told him I wasn't going into any home while I could still hold a chisel. He nodded the whole time like a man who'd already heard the answer and didn't care. He left an hour later, and I thought that was that. It wasn't that. It wasn't that. It was the opening bell. 3 weeks later, a woman I had never met knocked on my door with a county lanyard around her neck and a folder under her arm. Child Protective Services. Someone had filed a report. The report said an elderly man with a documented heart condition and a dangerous unsupervised woodshop full of power tools was raising a minor in a home with no working smoke detectors, that the child was frequently left alone, that the man's mental faculties were in decline. Every word of it was a lie wrapped around a thread of truth so it would hold. I do have a heart condition. I take a pill for it. The shop is full of saws, yes. And Bertie has never once been allowed past the threshold without me there. The smoke detectors work. I changed the batteries on her birthday, the way I do every year. But the woman wrote things down. She looked at the sawdust in the calendar with the doctor's appointments and at me, an old man in suspenders trying not to let my hands shake while she watched, and I understood, standing in my own doorway, that the report had come from my son. Tara was a paralegal. Reuben knew exactly which words to use. I called him that night. He didn't deny it. He said, "Dad, it's for everybody's good. You'll thank me." And then he said the thing I keep hearing in my sleep. He said, "You're not capable anymore. A judge is going to see that. Make it easy on yourself." I asked him why. Why now, after 11 years of never once offering to take her for a weekend, why he suddenly wanted a little girl he'd met maybe 4 times. There was a pause on the line. And then he laughed, soft and ugly, and said, "Don't flatter yourself thinking you've got me figured out." And he hung up. That laugh told me there was a why I couldn't see. Reuben never wanted anything that didn't have a dollar sign behind it. A man like that doesn't go to war over a child for love. So I did the only thing a man like me knows how to do when he can't see the shape of his enemy. I started measuring. I started with the obituaries. My daughter's father-in-law, Bertie's other grandfather on the dad's side, a man named Ostrander. I'd met exactly once at a funeral. I had a feeling about him. He'd been old money, timber money, the kind of family that owned half a county before they owned cars. I drove 40 minutes to the regional library and sat at a microfilm machine that hummed like a refrigerator. And I read every line of newsprint about the Ostrander family I could find. And there it was, 4 months back. Cornelius Ostrander, dead at 91. No surviving wife. 1 son, deceased. That was Bertie's father, who I now learned had died in a boating accident 2 years ago, and nobody had thought to tell an old man in Marrow Bend. Cornelius Ostrander died without a living child, which meant his estate, every acre of that timberland, flowed to the next of kin, to his grandchildren, to Bertie. I sat in that cold library for a long time with my heart doing the thing the pill is supposed to stop. Then I drove home, and I sat in the dark, and I did the math. I knew Reuben had already done. Bertie was the sole heir to a fortune, and a minor's fortune is controlled by her legal guardian. Whoever held Bertie held the keys to the vault. Reuben didn't want a granddaughter. He wanted a checkbook that came in a small package with pigtails. Now, you should understand something about me. I didn't tell Bertie any of this. Not then. How do you sit an 11-year-old down and explain that a man she's been taught to call uncle is trying to buy and sell her like a parcel of land? You don't. You protect her from the cold, the way you've always protected her, and you do your fighting outside where she can't hear it. The hearing for temporary custody was set for a Thursday. The county appointed me a lawyer named Mr. Okafor, a tired young man with too many files who told me, gently, that these things usually favor the younger, wealthier relative when there's a documented health concern. He told me to expect to lose her, at least for now, and to fight to get her back slow. I thanked him. I did not take his advice, because between that conversation and the hearing, 3 things happened, and I want to tell them to you in order, because each one took something out of me. I'm not sure I ever got back. The first thing happened on a Tuesday. I came home from the hardware store, and the back door at my shop was standing open. Inside, every drawer was pulled out. My files, my receipts, the lockbox where I kept Bertie's birth certificate, and my late wife's wedding ring, and the deed to the house. All of it gone through. They'd taken nothing valuable. They'd taken papers. They wanted documents. Anything that proved I was unfit, or anything that proved I knew about the inheritance. I stood in the wreckage of 40 years of work, and I understood that this had stopped being a family disagreement. This was a hunt. The second thing happened on a Thursday night, 2 days before the hearing. The phone rang. It was Bertie, and she was whispering, and she was crying, and the first thing she said was, "Grandpa, I'm scared." Reuben had picked her up from school that afternoon, just took her, told the office he was family, and the school let her go because his name was on a form Tara had filed. He'd driven her 2 hours to his house in Charlotte and told her she lived there now. He'd taken her phone. She was whispering on the landline in his guest room with the door locked. "There's a lady here measuring me for clothes," she whispered. "And a man took my picture a lot. Uncle Reuben keeps saying smile, smile, and Tara got mad when I cried. Grandpa, they won't let me call you. I found the old phone in the kitchen drawer. I gripped that receiver until my knuckles went white. I asked her if she was hurt. She said no, just scared. And then she said the thing that put the cold steel into me. She said the thing that put the cold steel into me. She said he told the photographer it's for the lawyer. He said a picture of a happy family is worth more than money. And then a door opened on her end and a sharp voice said, "Who are you talking to?" And the line went dead. He was building a file. He was staging photographs of a smiling, well-dressed child in a beautiful home to wave in front of a judge, while the real child cried in a locked room. My granddaughter was being arranged like furniture. I broke a rule that night. Mr. Tav, Okafor told me to stay away, that any contact could be used against me. I didn't care. I got in my truck at midnight, and I drove the 2 hours to Charlotte, and I sat outside a gated community I couldn't get into, watching a window I couldn't see through. An old man with a heart condition and nothing in his hands. I couldn't reach her. I drove home as the sun came up, and somewhere on that black highway I stopped feeling sorry for myself and started feeling something colder and steadier, and a great deal more useful. The third thing happened the morning of the hearing, and it's the reason I want you to stay with me to the end. So before I tell you, do me a kindness. If this story is reaching you, tap that like button and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. That helps an old man know his words found somebody. Now. The third thing. The morning of the hearing, a man was waiting by my truck. Big fellow, mid-50s, gone soft in the middle, with eyes that didn't blink enough. He said his name was Mr. Dunley, and he worked for Ruben's attorney. He held out a thick envelope. Inside, he said, was a certified check for $60,000 and a single document. All I had to do was sign away any claim to Birdie's guardianship and agree to no contact, and I could retire comfortable and quiet and never set foot in a courtroom. $60,000. That was more cash than I'd held in my whole life. I have $11 and some change in a coffee can over my workbench. I looked at that envelope a long while. Then I asked him one question. What's she worth? The girl, to Ruben. Dunley smiled like we were finally talking sense. Enough that 60 grand is a rounding error, friend. Take it. The smart ones always take it. I took the envelope. His smile got bigger, and then I tore it in half, and in half again, and I dropped the pieces on the wet gravel by his polished shoes. I leaned in close enough to smell his breath mints. You tell my son, I said, that I have sat with that child through every fever and every bad dream of her whole life, and he has never sat with her through one. You tell him she is not for sale. And you tell him I'm not the soft old man he thinks I'm fighting. Dunley's smile fell off his face. He told me I was making a mistake I'd regret. He got in his car and left twin black lines on the road. He was right that I'd regret things. He was wrong about which things. The courtroom was small and smelled like floor wax and old paper. Ruben was there in a suit that cost more than my truck, with tar up beside him in pearls, and a lawyer named Hargreave who had the slick, expensive look of a man who'd never lost. And there was Birdie, sitting between them in a stiff new dress, her hair done in a way she'd never wear it, looking so small and so far from me that my chest seized. She found my eyes across that room and I watched her start to stand, and Tara put a hand on her shoulder and pressed her back down. Hargreave was good. I'll give the double that. He laid out a story of a feeble, declining man in a dangerous home, complete with the falsified CPS report and a doctor's note about my heart, taken wildly out of context. He showed the judge the photographs. Birdie in that beautiful house, surrounded by toys she'd never been allowed to touch, a manufactured smile pinned to her face. He called a witness, a neighbor of mine named Pelletier, who I'd shared a fence and 20 years of friendship with, and who now sat up there and said he'd seen me confused, seen me leave the girl alone, seen me unsteady. Lies? Everyone. And I learned later Ruben had paid off the man's truck loan. The judge, a stern woman named Calloway. No, I won't use her name. It's not the point. The judge was watching me the way you watch something you've already decided about. My young lawyer, Mr. Okafor, did his honest best, but he was a man with a slingshot facing a tank, and I could see in his shoulders that he believed we were losing. When it came my turn, the judge asked if I had any witnesses. I said no. She asked if I had a statement, and I stood up, and my knees popped, and I felt every one of my 68 years, and I reached into the inside pocket of the one-suit jacket I own. I don't have a statement, Your Honor, I said. I have a question for my son, and I have a piece of paper. I had spent the 3 nights before that hearing not sleeping. I'd gone back to the library, and then to the county records office, and then to a retired lawyer in town named Ferris, who'd known my late wife and who, when I told him the whole of it, got a hard light in his eyes and made some calls for free. What we found was this. When Cornelius Ostrander's estate went to probate, somebody had filed an early petition to be named the financial guardian of the minor heir. That petition was filed 2 days before Reuben ever drove up my gravel road to play the concerned son. 2 days before he claimed he'd been thinking about me all alone. He'd known about the money first. He'd known about the money before he ever pretended to care. And on that petition, in the section asking the relationship of the petitioner to the child, Reuben had written a sworn statement claiming he was the child's primary caregiver and had been for years. He swore it. Notarized. A felony to lie on. And he'd lied on it in ink. I held up the certified copy. This is dated 4 months ago, I said. And I read the date aloud, and I read his sworn words aloud. And I watched the color leave my son's face one shade at a time. He told this court he raised her. He has held her maybe 4 times. He filed this paper before he ever called me. He didn't find out his niece was alone and worry. He found out his niece was rich, and he came hunting. I said it on the bench in front of the judge. I have his name on a document swearing to a lie, under oath. 4 months before he pretended to care whether I lived or died. The room went very quiet. Hargreave was on his feet shouting about admissibility. The judge was reading, and I watched her face change the way a sky changes before a storm. And then the back doors of the courtroom banged open. It was Bertie's friend's mother, a woman named Solveig who lived down our road, and behind her, breathing hard, was a man I hadn't seen in years. Ferris, the retired lawyer, leaning on a cane. But it wasn't them who made the room gasp. It was that Bertie had pulled free of Tara's hand and was running down the center aisle. And she had a phone in her hand. The old phone from the kitchen drawer. The one she'd hidden in her sock, and she was shouting, "I recorded it. Grandpa, I recorded it. Play it, play it." The judge, to her everlasting credit, said, "Bring it here, child." What was on that phone was Reuben and Tara in their kitchen, not knowing a scared 11-year-old had left a phone recording on the counter. Tara's voice, sharp and bored. "How long do we have to keep her here being cute before the money comes through?" And Reuben's voice, the voice I'd taught to say its prayers. "Once the guardianship's signed, we move the trust. Boarding school in Asheville, the cheap one. Far enough she's not underfoot. The old man'll be dead inside 2 years anyway. Look at him." And then Tara laughing. "And we never have to drive out to that hillbilly shop again." You could have heard a pin drop in that courtroom. The judge set the phone down very slowly. She looked at Reuben for a long, long time, and then she looked at me, and at Bertie, who'd crossed the whole room and was now pressed against my side with her face in my jacket, and the judge's stone face cracked into something almost like grief. She found in my favor on the spot. She ordered an investigation into the falsified report, the bribed witness, the forged caregiving claim. Hargreave was reported to the bar by nightfall. Tara was charged. Reuben, my boy, my Reuben, was led out a side door in handcuffs for perjury and fraud, and as they took him he looked back at me. And I'll tell you the truth, I didn't feel triumph. I felt the same thing I felt the day he was born and they put him in my arms. A fierce and helpless love for a person who was already, somehow, leaving. He got 4 years. Tara got 3. The money, Birdie's money, the Timberland fortune, was put in a locked trust she can't touch until she's 25, and that not even I can spend. I made sure of that. I hired the most honest, most boring trustee in the state, and I told her to guard it like a dragon. That money will pay for college, for a first house, for whatever Birdie decides her life should be. It will not buy me one single thing. And that is exactly how it should be. I sold the house in Merrill Bend. The shop too. There were too many ghosts in those rooms now. Too many doorways where I could still see the woman with the county lanyard and the open drawers and my own son's leased car on my gravel. We didn't need the walls. We needed each other and the open country. I'd always wanted to see the ocean roads, the long ones, the ones that don't end. So I bought an old camper and I fixed it up myself. Every joint and cabinet, the last good thing these old hands will ever build. Birdie picked the curtains. It got that cartoon dog on them, the one from the lunchbox, because some things you don't grow out of. We left in October. We drove the spine of the Blue Ridge and then turned toward the coast. And we ate boiled peanuts from roadside stands and slept in the camper with the windows cracked to the sound of crickets. Birdie's asthma is better in the salt air. She laughs more now. Sometimes at night she'll go quiet, and I know she's thinking about the kitchen and the recording and the man in handcuffs. And I let her think it, and then I tell her the only thing I know to be true. Blood made Reuben my son. It didn't make him family. Family is the one who stays through the fever and the bad dream and the long night. Family is the one who tears up the check. Family is the one who hides a phone in her sock. Because at 11 years old, she understood. Better than a courtroom full of adults, who had been there and who had not. We're parked tonight on a bluff over the Atlantic. The water's gone silver under the moon. Birdie's asleep with the cartoon dog quilt up to her chin. And these ruined old hands of mine are steady on the wheel of a life I never planned and would not trade for every acre of Ostrander timber in the state. Reuben thought a child was worth a fortune. He was right. He just never understood the currency, and he never will. And that is the poorest a man can be. The day they put Birdie in my arms at the funeral home, I had no plan and no money, and a body that already ached when it rained. What I had was a decision. I would not let this child be raised by the world that took her mother. 11 years later, I understand that almost everything that happened, the good and the rotten, both grew straight out of decisions like that one. Reuben filed his paper before he ever drove up my road, and from that single lie, everything else followed for him. The false report, the bought witness, the staged photographs, the man in handcuffs. You don't get to plant a seed like that and harvest something clean. He chose the money first, and the money is exactly what he lost. I think a lot about why I won, when every lawyer told me I'd lose. It wasn't because I was strong, though I had to be. It started with something quieter than strength. It started with knowing the difference between what's easy and what's right, and refusing to sign the easy thing even when $60,000 sat in my hand and my coffee can held 11. A man can be old and broke and still own the one thing nobody can buy off him, which is who he decides to be when no one's watching. But being right wasn't enough by itself. If I'd only had a clean heart, Reuben would have taken her, because the world doesn't hand victory to good men. It hands it to prepared ones. I had to go sit at that humming microfilm machine. I had to read the obituaries, find Ferris, drive to the records office, understand the shape of the thing before I could fight it. The fight wasn't won in the courtroom. It was won in a cold library by an old man who decided to use his head instead of his fists. That matters. Doing the work to actually understand your enemy is its own kind of fighting. And most folks skip it because it's slow and unglamorous. And then there was the part that nearly broke me. The nights I didn't sleep. The drive to Charlotte where I couldn't even reach her. The moment I had to keep standing when my knees and my heart both wanted to quit. None of the knowing would have mattered if I'd laid down. You have to be able to take the hit and get back up scared and keep going anyway. Birdie taught me that, oddly enough. An 11-year-old hid a phone in her sock because she understood, better than a room full of grown adults, that you don't wait to be rescued. You do the small, brave thing in front of you. So if you take anything from an old man tonight, take this. Decide who you are before the envelope shows up, because it always shows up. Then do the patient, unglamorous work of understanding what you're up against. And when it costs you everything, stand up one more time than you fall. Reuben had money, lawyers, and the law on his side, and he still lost. Because none of those things are the same as character, a clear mind, and the refusal to quit. Those three, you can't inherit and you can't buy. You build them, one hard choice at a time.